want to make this clear. The National Guard will come back under my authority by noon tomorrow. The National Guard will be redeployed to what they were doing before Donald Trump commandeered them. The National Guard will go back to border security, working on counter-drug enforcement and fentanyl enforcement, which they were taken off by Donald Trump. The National Guard will go back to working on what we refer to as the rattlesnake teams, doing vegetation and forest management, which Donald Trump took them off in preparation for wildfire season. The National Guard, men and women, will go back to their day jobs, which include law enforcement, that he took them off the job.
Several days later.
Breaking news. Let's get some information from Politico's Kyle Cheney. He says a federal appeals court has indefinitely blocked Judge Breyer's order to put Gavin Newsom back in control of the National Guard. A 3-judge panel, which included 2 Trump and 1 Biden appointee, was unanimous, according to Politico.
Boy. So we got to talk about a major W for President Trump and a major L for Democratic Governor Gavin Newsom, who tried to take back control of the National Guard from President Trump after President Trump deployed the National Guard to protect federal agents who were conducting mass deportations, ICE operations in Los Angeles, okay? And they were attacked by the domestic terrorists out in LA and illegal immigrants because, again, they don't want ICE to do their jobs of deporting the illegals. And now we have a court that has essentially overruled a lower court judge, okay, a woke judge, who basically ruled that Gavin Newsom could take back control of the National Guard from the president, that the president did not go through the proper channels and that it was a violation of the 10th Amendment. That woke judge did not buy into President Trump's arguments about the criteria that needed to be met in order for the president to deploy the National Guard. However, now you have an appeals court saying that judge was wrong, okay? And this is not really a surprise. Even MSNBC saw this ruling coming, okay? This was MSNBC coping just 24 hours ago about the possibility of the appeals court siding with the president after hearing the president's arguments and the state's arguments. Take a look.
Joining us now, former FBI General Counsel and MSNBC legal analyst Andrew Weissman, New York Times reporter and MSNBC contributor Jeremy Peters, and former U.S. Army captain and Iraq War veteran Allison Jaslow. Andrew, the arguments yesterday, we played a little bit of them here on this show, and in the initial argument from the government, it did appear that the judges were skeptical of the argument that the Trump administration was making, that he could just deploy the National Guard whenever he saw fit without a reason. Then a bit later, when California got up to argue their side of this, the judges were also pretty skeptical. And so much so, it seems that they're leaning toward allowing Donald Trump to have this power. What will that mean for the expansion of presidential powers?
So the government took a maximalist view of the executive's power, and they argued that the court simply has no basis to review anything they do in terms of the president calling up and federalizing the National Guard. One of the judges who was appointed by Donald Trump asked the question, which was a good one, which was, but are you saying if there was no violence at all in Los Angeles, or are you saying if there was no violence anywhere in the country, that the president could simply say that he's calling up the National Guard because he thinks that there's a concern about a rebellion either in Los Angeles or, frankly, anywhere in the country? That was the question that that judge put to the government, and they said that the court has no place whatsoever to judge that it is solely within the executive's power, the president's power. And they're relying on an 1827 Supreme Court case, which does, largely support that position, the sort of maximalist view. And so you have the Trump administration clearly banking on the fact that the Ninth Circuit has to follow even a very, very old Supreme Court case. So that, I think, is why you're seeing the Supreme Court as the court that's ultimately going to have to decide this. And the Ninth Circuit, I think, may feel like its sort of hands are tied by that 1827 precedent.
Yeah, so you seen that, you heard that. Okay, even MSNBC saw this coming because, like I told you guys when I first talked about this legal battle, I said this is actually an important thing to work out because to me, it kind of seems like a weird loophole to basically live in a world or a country where Democrat governors are allowed to let domestic extremists, domestic terrorists attack federal agents, and the president can't do anything about it, right? The president can't use federal forces to protect federal agents when Democrat governors don't allow local law enforcement to do so. That's a really, really, really bad precedent, right? That's not something that you want in this country, okay? And in this case, the Ninth Circuit explicitly accepted and relied on an 1827 Supreme Court precedent of Martin versus Mott, a case that upheld President Madison's power to federalize the New York militia during the War of 1812, right? So again, this was a precedent that was set a long time ago, but essentially in a nutshell, using this precedent, the court ruled that the president is the sole judge of whether or not an invasion or the inability to execute laws exists. Like, for example, I would argue that an invasion occurred in LA because, again, you had these illegal immigrants, some of whom committing acts of violence, waving foreign flags. Looks like an invasion to me, right? Also, on top of that, the inability to execute laws. You talk about federal agents trying to execute immigration law and not being able to do so because they were being attacked by domestic terrorists. Yeah, once the president declares that this is happening, that decision is up to him and is not subject to secondary guessing or the courts coming in and overruling the president, even though the Supreme Court could come in and overrule the 1827 ruling that essentially established that the president has this kind of broad authority, right? That deference is given to the president when it comes to these matters. And that is, again, why the Supreme Court ultimately has to review this. It's just not the role of the appeals court to basically take away that deference that was given to the president under that original ruling, okay? Even though they can review whether or not the president had statutory authority to do what he did, and they basically sided with the president. They basically said that, yeah, even without that 1827 ruling, the president still would have met all of the requirements necessary to deploy the National Guard just because of the fact that the regular forces, aka the ICE agents, were unable to execute the laws of the United States because of the fact that the domestic terrorists were attacking them, right? Because of that, the conditions were met for the president to be able to deploy the National Guard even without that precedent. So again, this is basically a win, a big W for President Trump. And without further ado, I want to go ahead and play a reaction here from CNN, okay? They just got the news, okay? And this is their raw reaction to Gavin Newsom taking a big L.
We just got some breaking news that an appeals court is now allowing Trump to continue having control of the California National Guard. This is an offshoot of that situation where there were riots and confrontations with law enforcement, and Trump said, I'm going to take over the National Guard and send them in. Now they're being able to do that after some litigation over the last week and a half. But look, one of the reasons, I mean, this is a connected story. You know, you're talking about these ICE agents and DHS agents and all of these folks who are carrying out these raids. The masks have been an issue.
Why?
I'm just stating that for people, they're seeing these men showing up in their communities in hats and in black masks covering everything but their eyes. And we've had deportation raids for many a decade in this country. President Obama's administration did it to the tune of millions. And yet we did not see that.
But here's why.
The reason why is because we're in a different political environment. Back then, the sanctuary cities, at least for a couple of years, they were willing to work with Obama, right? Back then, we didn't have the domestic terrorism that we have today. Abby Phillip knows the answer to this question, but the fact is that these people don't want to admit that the vast majority of the political violence in this country is coming from the left, that these agents cannot execute their duties because of the domestic terrorism. That is why they have to hide their identities, because you have these extremists seeking revenge against these agents, okay, doxing their families, exposing their addresses, probably trying to show up to their homes to attack them, to harm them. Yeah, that is why we live in a different political environment. She knows the answer to this question. She's just playing dumb.
Have the left when who you work for, Barack Obama was doing this, deporting a lot of people. You didn't have the left saying, we're going to dox you and your family, we're going to put your lives at risk, and we're going to put your addresses on the internet, we're going to go to your house and live stream, and we're going to put your kids' Instagram on social media out there saying you're a bad guy. That wasn't happening when Barack Obama was doing it, because now Donald Trump's doing it, therefore let's go after ICE.
You're saying all law enforcement, just because they're afraid of being doxxed, if the NYPD today has some sort of protest against it, they now have to start wearing uniforms and not any insignia on them. Look, I was at.
That's not what I'm saying at all.
Let me tell you this.
My dad's in law enforcement. That's not what I'm saying at all. So let me finish this. Because, like, when you come from a law enforcement family and you see these guys, and you see these guys that come out there and they risk their lives and they're doing their job. And then you have, like, I'm sorry with the Dodgers, like, the Dodgers things makes me mad, because I think they were making a point probably to sell tickets and to get fanfare behind them.
I talked to the mayor today. That's not true.
So you think that the Dodgers didn't do that thinking the PR aspect of it was, we're going to stand up to ICE, and then we're going to have more people that like us in the legal immigrant community, or those that have friends in the legal immigrant community.
You're taking up a lot of space here.
I just started talking a second ago. I just started talking.
It was not a second ago, but look, one thing I just want to note, like, you know, when there are judges who rule against the Trump administration and conservative, policies, people dox them, they dox their family members, they call them evil and activists.
Supreme Court justices that were doxed,
right?
No
So I guess my point is that is happening to people who are not even in law enforcement. They're just people in black robes sitting on a bench.
And Democratic
but
lawmakers getting shot.
Nobody says anything about it. All of it's bad. All of it's bad. But I also think, look, again, ICE has been detaining and deporting people in this country for a long time, okay? The difference is not just this moment. It is also the tactics,
yes.
Okay? It is the people that they are going after. They're taking women and moms at their hearing where they've been called.
Again, none of these tactics would be necessary if the sanctuary cities cooperated. See, these people, they play so dumb. They play so stupid. If the sanctuary cities cooperated, this would not be necessary. It's only necessary because the sanctuary cities don't cooperate. These people think, well, it's okay for the sanctuary cities not to cooperate. Let's make ICE's job super hard. And then they want to get mad when ICE says, okay, cool, well, we're going to go out in communities and conduct the mass deportations ourselves since the sanctuary cities don't want to cooperate. And then they boo-hoo whine and cry about that. But they have nothing to say. They never have anything to say about the sanctuary cities themselves refusing to cooperate with federal law enforcement. They have no issues with that. Zero issues with that. But they got an issue with federal law enforcement say, okay, well, we still gonna do what we gotta do. It's almost as if they just want the illegals to stay, right? Which is exactly what they want. That's what they want. That's what they want.
To appear for their immigration proceedings, taking them but they're at their hearing, they're being told to come, and then they are detaining them in the hallways.
After they're told, after they get their due process, which is what these people beg for. The illegals need due process. They get their due process, okay? The judge says you can't stay. ICE arrests them on the spot. They still complaining. They still boo-hoo, whining, and crying. They still bitching, right? Again, almost as if this is not about due process. Almost as if this is not about ICE tactics. It's really about they just want the illegals to stay no matter what. It doesn't matter what ICE does. It doesn't matter if the illegals get due process. They're still going to come up with some reason to be mad and to be upset that the illegals are being deported. It's amazing, absolutely amazing to listen to these people talk.
Breaking the glass windows of cars. I'm just telling you, it's the tactics that is changing the way people are seeing
American citizens go to court all the time and get arrested and taken away from their kids, and no one is acting like this is some injustice.
I don't think you understand what go ahead, I'm sorry.
But that happens every day.
No, but it's not.
Do you know how many people are in the prison population in America?
And when it does,
how many
if you've
moms and
ever
dads?
known somebody that has happened, it's devastating.
Van, go ahead.
It's terrible. It's not.
Then don't break the law. Don't break the law.
It's traumatizing
Self-deport.
to the child.
Who's breaking the law?
The people that are here
No,
illegally.
I'm sorry.
No, you don't
Let me
understand what
stop
you're
here.
People that are here illegally are breaking the
Let me
law.
just finish my thought here. There are plenty of people here
who
are here legally, who had legal status,
Yes.
who are showing up to to basically to renew their legal status or to check in as the rules dictated, and they are getting deported.
Yes, after their legal status is revoked, right? It's revoked. After the judge says you can't stay, that's when they get deported, right? That's when they're leaving out. They're not mentioning that. Why are you not mentioning that fact? They got their due process and they're being deported. These people make me sick. They're so dishonest.
And they're getting arrested. That is not right. These people have the right to be here.
They have the right to be here. After the judge told him, no, you don't have the right to be here. Still, according to these lunatics, they have the right to be here, right? Again, you can't make this up. You can't make it up.
Living in hiding right now. I know them. They are in hiding, that have visas, that are here legally because they are afraid of the tactics of ICE. These are not fairy tales. These are not fairy tales.
See, we live in two different worlds. In the world you live in, the main thing that's happening is that ICE people are being mistreated. And I didn't even know as much about it as you told me today, so I'm learning. In the world I live in, the rule followers, the people who have legal status, who are trying to do what they're told, are also getting grabbed in ways that would shock you and are being deported. That's why you're having the alarm. So you're just saying, oh, somebody's breaking the law and they should get arrested. If that's what we're talking about, there's no conversation. We're talking about the rule followers who are getting in trouble.
The majority of the people being arrested. Hold on. It's not the majority. It's not the majority have legal status. Well, that's not true. That is misinformation.
No, hold on a second. First of all,
or a lie, however you want to describe it.
Well, the majority of ICE people are not getting doxxed, but what I'm saying is there are people. I've come to LA. There are people.
I live in Houston. I see a ton of illegal immigrants. They're not hard to find.
They are dogpiling us in LA. And you have nannies who are literally out there with children being sworn by people with masks, taken away. These people have legal status, and the children are traumatized. That's what's happening, and people are very upset about it.
Let me say this. Number one, it's not the majority, but number two, it's this. I go back to law and order. You either have law and order or you don't.
That's my point.
And when you let in, and by the way, if you want to be mad at somebody, if you want to be mad at somebody, you should be mad at Joe Biden for letting in millions. Who let him in? Who let him in?
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah. So you see that, you heard that. Okay. Ultimately, at the end of the day, with these liberals, you got to understand they're not arguing in good faith. This is not a good faith argument. And again, you gotta have people on the show that can really get at the heart of what this is, which is that they just want the illegals to stay. They're getting their due process, and they're being arrested after they get their due process. A vast majority of these people that are seeking asylum, their cases are denied. That's what they're leaving out. Their cases are being denied, right? They're being rejected by the courts. They're told, you got to go back. And ICE deports them after they're told they have to go back. So they're not here legally anymore. That's what they're leaving out. And you got to have people on the show that actually are pointing that out, because these liberals are lying, right? They're being disingenuous. These are not good faith arguments. They're pretending as if the illegals being deported are here legally. Well, they're just trying to do the right thing. Well, trying to do the right thing doesn't mean that they're here legally, right? Them trying to be here legally still doesn't give them the right to stay here. And it doesn't mean that they're here legally. Once the judge says you got to go back, you got to go back. Okay? It is what it is. It doesn't matter when they get arrested. Okay, they just need to get arrested and go back. Preferably the sooner the better, right? Immediately, okay? And that's what's happening. And they're boohoo whining and crying about it. So anyways, when it comes to the original topic of this video, right, this court ruling against Gavin Newsom, this is a massive L for him, okay, and for the Democrats, and a huge W for President Trump. And it seems like it is very unlikely that the Supreme Court is going to side with Gavin Newsom, because they definitely are going to appeal. They're probably not going to side with Gavin Newsom because, again, like I told you guys, the appeals court basically said even without that 1827 precedent, right, the president still was in his statutory authority to do what he did, right? Just based off the fact that the federal agents were being attacked, right, by the domestic terrorists. Because of that, he had the right to call in a National Guard. And that means that likely, again, if/when this gets to the Supreme Court, they're not going to side with Gavin Newsom and the Democrat state. So we're going to see, right? We're going to see what happens. But as of right now, again, a massive W for President Trump. Let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.